Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Yeah. Welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We've got a big show this week with 3 brand new reviews, which all are now playing in theaters. This week on the show, Pooh Bear is back and joined by Piglet, Owl, and Tigger to have their revenge, leaving a bloody trail and mayhem in their wake. And just like the first movie, this tagline makes me feel dirty just saying it. In Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Fight together or face extinction in Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. And finally, Sydney Sweeney plays a woman of faith and is offered a new role at an Italian countryside convent. But it becomes clear that her new home harbors dark and horrifying secrets. In Immaculate. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch, a roar and a burst of flame. The Movie Wire podcast. You need people like me.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Not wanting to live in the shadows any longer, Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Owl, and Tigger take their fight to the town of Ashdown, leaving a bloody trail of death and mayhem in their wake in Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Let's begin. I'm going to take you back. Feel all weight drift away. How are you feeling?
Good, I think.
Do you recall anything from the session? Focus. What is happening?
This was the day Billy was taken.
Them kids. They didn't stay buried. As if the earth itself was allowing this horror to rise up.
There's some unsettling similarities to the 100-Acre Massacre.
It's not safe. There have been loads of murders leading to Ashdown.
Tell me everything you saw, please.
I knew that this day would come.
All of Ashdown will burn.
Now, it's just been a little over a year when the first Blood and Honey came out in February 2023. That film wasted no time when that copyright went public to create something for audiences that was the polar opposite than what we've seen from our childhood. And it came with mixed reviews. I was on the side that absolutely hated it because it was as good as I thought it would be, given how long it took to hit theater screens. It was sloppy, it was low budget, and more importantly, it didn't have fun with the low budget aspect to be the so bad it's good. It took these characters that we all grew up with, we all knew, and the filmmakers just threw a bunch of garbage up at the screen and told the audience, you know what I'm trying to do here? You enjoy this big pile of shit that I have on screen. And this concept of taking characters we're familiar with isn't new, but it's becoming prominent coming to the big screen. So far, we're having these classic characters start to pop up more and more. We have the Mickey Mouse horror movie coming out, we have Cinderella's Revenge, Bambi's A Reckoning, Pinocchio Unstrung, and even Peter Pan's Nightmare in Neverland. These are all set to release in theaters, and some of these characters have had horror spin-offs in the past. But now, with studios being studios, seeing low budgets but good attendance in theaters, it was unavoidable that we would get the spin-off horror movies that land on the big screen, versus prior what we would get is straight to video or straight now to streaming. And open and honest, I'm not against that, even if the movie is extremely bad. And I can even see the dollar signs in studio executives' eyes. Because these movies are best seen with a group of people or large audience to really enhance the fun factor of the badness and the ridiculousness of it. The first Blood and Honey, I had a huge group in my theater, but the problem was that it just wasn't fun. It took itself way too seriously and it fell flat. It didn't know its audience. Now, Killer Pooh Bear is back with a bigger budget, but still, from pre-production to post-production, this took under a year to push into theaters. So I went into this movie really dragging my feet of getting more of the same old garbage. But I have to say, even though this movie is still a big flaming pile of garbage, I did have a much better time with this one than the original. Blood and Honey 2 brings back our director Rice Frank Waterfield, who also wrote the original alongside A.A. Milne, but now they add a new writer here, Matt Leslie, who wrote the film Summer of '84, which was a ho-hum film, but Leslie did add an interesting screenplay that really was the best part of the movie. So I was curious if this add-on will fix the utter dumpster fire of a screenplay from the first one. Now, again, just like the first one, I wasn't going in expecting a masterpiece. The main reason people go to this isn't the written dialogue or even the story. But when it comes to adding the crowd-pleasing fun factor in, this is where the screenwriters and director have to be on par on what's written and how it's translated to screen. And I don't know for sure on the amount of work Leslie put into this screenplay, but this could have been the missing element from the first film, because this movie does seem a little bit different. It does show a tad bit more effort to try and do something different. And I'm not saying that it was done well, but there is an attempt here compared to most sequels. Blood and Honey 2 brings back our Christopher Robin this go-around, played by Scott Chambers, that replaces Nikolai Leon, which I'm not going to compare these actors because both of these actors give kind of a straightforward performance for a movie like this. And let's just be honest, you can put a broomstick as Christopher Robin and nobody would care, because they're coming for one reason, and that reason is to see Pooh Bear's brutal kills. As I just mentioned, the writers do attempt to put in some sort of a story here, and there is some clever ideas. There's an early scene where we have our introduced owl speak. Yes, we go into the bigger sequel. The filmmakers wanted something bigger, so with this bigger budget, we get some of our characters that can actually speak. They must not have had a big enough budget for our lame-ass dressed-up characters to speak in the first film. But again, here in this sequel, our Pooh Bear does stay silent. But anyway, like I said, in a very early scene with Owl, voiced by Marcus Massey, he gives a convincing speech to his forest friends to convince them out of the woods. This speech piqued my curiosity as the film goes on. We get these little signs of potential of these ideas. There's some okay lines that really spark ideas throughout the film, but these are never executed. Instead, we get these intimate up-close shot scenes with characters that try to appear to be all wise and all knowing on screen, including another speech by a human character, Cavendish, played by Simon Callow, who once played our bat-stealing villain Cadby from Ace Ventura 2. Now, I love Callow as an actor, but I swear he picks his role solely based on how high-class or unique his character name is. And again, he does a decent job given the material here. Now, the story here is ludicrous as we discover the origins of our thousand-acre wood pals. And these origins, even ludicrous, have potential to be something fun if our screenwriters really took their time to plan out this screenplay to make it as clever as they think it is. Because our writers dance around some really fun elements, but it never truly lands. That's the problem with rushing a script to hit theaters in a year's time. Now, Blood and Honey 2 does, dare I say, have more to its story than its predecessor, predecessor, and it adds 2 more characters, Owl that I mentioned earlier, and now Tigger, played by Louis Santer, who is the most intimidating character from the bunch. And I think during shooting, our filmmakers realize this because he gets all the best shots. He gets all the best lighting, he gets all the best up-close shots. So they really utilize taking advantage of our Tigger character in our performance by Louis Santer. Tigger also has the most scary, if you want to call it that, scenes, or intense moments. But here is where lies the problem with this horror film. Now, I complained earlier that the first one was so low budget it didn't embrace itself or even have fun. Here we do have a bigger budget, and instead of changing course to have fun with the idea, it takes itself more seriously. And to an extent, compared to the first film, there is a better level of execution here on that our writers and directors obviously had a vision for how they wanted these movies to play out. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't work. Just having these characters that everybody is familiar with go around killing people isn't enough, especially if the kills are never really too over the top to either make us turn our heads or make us laugh, as we get like in the Terrifier films. We had that with our characters that are so poorly designed, they're so dark, so boring, that they just kind of blend together in the scenery. Even though I like the Tigger character, the only time I can appreciate him is where he has an up-close shot or the lighting was just right. There's no uniqueness to these characters. Our owl design just looked like our Jeepers Creeper costume that the studio pulled out of storage and gave a coat of paint to. So even when we take it at a serious level that our filmmakers took us to, it still lacks fun, it still lacks uniqueness, and it follows the same generic formula we have seen countless times in horror movies. The only difference is that it's just with characters we are familiar with, but quickly forget that these are Winnie the Pooh characters within about 30 minutes, because our filmmakers don't utilize this idea. They don't take advantage of the concept of it. They insult the audience by throwing cheap-looking characters on screen and tell the audience, hey, everybody gets this idea, right? You get these are Winnie the Pooh characters that kill, right? At that point, you might as well just lose the costumes and just have the actors in normal clothing walk around with name tags that say Winnie the Pooh, Owl, Piglet, and Tigger. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2 is a very, very marginal step above the original movie when it comes to the entertainment value. But at the same time, it struggles to find what to do with a bigger budget other than just adding 2 more characters. But I will give the filmmakers credit for at least attempting to take this movie in a different direction, but at the same time, blame them for not using their heads on something more clever that they tease in this movie. I can visualize our writers late at night typing up a good idea for a scene or direction they want to go, but then falling asleep at the computer, then waking up not remembering what the idea was. So these ideas on screen feel unfinished, they feel segmented and wasted. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is still a gigantic flaming pile of poo. I'm giving Blood and Honey 2 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
A true story of a hairdresser who rallies a community to help a widowed father save the life of his child in Ordinary Angels. That made me shed a tear and cheer, receiving 3 stars. Meet Chauncey. He's not imaginary and he's not your friend. And he's in a horrible movie in Imaginary, which received 1.5 stars. Madam Web just hit streaming, and Nobody Cares, receiving 1.5 stars. No man is left behind in the Russell Crowe thriller Land of the Bad, which took me to the land of good popcorn flicks, receiving 3 stars. A story of 2 ladies going south in Ethan Coen's Drive Away Dolls, which took no time at all to really go south, receiving 2.5 stars. Dig Up Someone Special in Lisa Frankenstein, which dug up all the wrong things and left the good stuff buried, receiving 1.5 stars. And finally, the greater the spy, the bigger the lie in Argyle, which was a disappointing disaster that made me root for the villain for world domination, receiving 1.5 stars. Now, before we jump into the last set of reviews, there is a podcast that has become my weekly work tradition to give me the mental break from the daily routine of the workplace. It's wild, it's entertaining, and it has naughty language. All the things I love. And that's with J&K over the My Work Life podcast. Make sure to check them out. The link to their show will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from J&K over the My Work Life podcast now.
Work sucks. Am I right, Jay?
Yeah, Kay, it does.
But luckily, the F My Work Life podcast is here to help you through.
In this comedy podcast, we share memorable workplace stories through guests and listener submissions in the hopes of brightening your day, or at least leave you thinking, maybe you don't have it so bad after all.
Listen to F My Work Life on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on all the socials at FMWL Pod.
Two ancient titans, Godzilla and Kong, clash in an epic battle as humans unravel their intertwined origins and connection to Skull Island's mystery in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire.
For most of human civilization, we believed that life could only exist on the surface of our planet. What else were we wrong about?
Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in?
This world has more secrets than we could possibly imagine.
Miracles I get. Still now and then.
What is that?
That's not coming. Who could have done this?
Kong can't stop this on his own.
He won't be alone.
Is that a mini Kong?
Now, it hasn't been that long since Godzilla -1 came out, and that was one of my top 10 best films of the year last year. It would be so hard to top that. Godzilla -1 set the bar on Godzilla movies moving forward. And honestly, after seeing the trailer to Godzilla Kong, I walked in knowing very well what kind of movie I was going to get. My bar wasn't set that high, but this to me was going to be my trip to the concession stand and a bucket of popcorn kind of movie. Then, Godzilla Kong surprised me. I got swept up in all the beautiful artificial CGI scenery. The beginning Kong scenes were silent but entertaining. I was swept into this new world. But as the movie went on, it reminded me of watching the beauty of a sunset. It's a beautiful sight, the color, the mix of dark and light intertwining. But eventually, I start to get bored staring at the same damn colors and scenery. And I just want the sun to go down so I can move on. And when the sun finally does go down, just like the movie, it kind of just gets cold. The idea of watching a sunset to me was better than sitting there watching the sunset. And that's what we have here. The idea of Godzilla and Kong, like the sunset, is something we all know it's going to happen. At first sight, it's beautiful, but then I'm just sitting there until it goes into pure dark and nothingness. Godzilla Kong is a beautiful, well, artificially beautiful sight to see. But after we are taken in with the awe of the scenery, the movie doesn't really add add anything more interesting after the fact. We are introduced to returning characters from the 2021's Kong vs. Godzilla, Ian played by Rebecca Hall, podcaster Bernie played by Brian Tyree Henry, and our young Gia from the tribe from Skull Island played by Kaylee Hoddle. If you don't remember much about these characters, it's okay, neither do I, because the main event of Godzilla and Kong overpowered them in Godzilla vs. Kong, where characters are just merely there to briefly set the setting for where Kong is going to go next, and to move our gigantic beast to the next obstacle. This must have been an easy gig for this cast because we don't have a lot of human screen time. Our director Adam Wingard probably said more lines by calling out lunchtime during the shoot than the amount of lines our characters have. Godzilla Kong was written by Terry Rossio, writers of Pirates of the Caribbean, The Lone Ranger, Little Monsters, and Disney's Aladdin, along with Jeremy Slater from the disastrous 2015's Fantastic Four and 2017's live-action Death Note movie. Jeremy Slater, there's a great writer for a big-budget movie. And finally, another writer that must have been our director's friend who owed him a favor, writer Simon Barrett, who worked with Wingard on the VHS movies, the Blair Witch remake, You're Next, and Guest. What a waste of talent from Terry Rossio to be joined by writers that have made some mediocre to just plain bad films. This I had a hard time believing this was written by Rossio, even though the dialogue does tease at some simplistic fun. It is so brief with characters. It's brief when the characters speak. This script must have been razor thin. By the time the next film happens, I will again forget these characters ever existed. I actually had to see this movie again so I can focus on the characters because everything else on screen was a distraction because our characters have nothing interesting to do or interesting to say. And to an extent, it's rightfully so. This is a Kong Godzilla movie. But we did have a character that did stand out, and that was with the exception of Dan Stevens, who plays Trapper, almost the comedy relief of the movie, who was there to tend to Kong and help trap him to care for him. His character at least had some interesting scenes, some interesting humor, energy, and a performance that stood above his counterparts. Every other character, just like its predecessor, gets overwhelmed by the CGI spectacle and becomes lost in this film. These characters are truly just utilized as props. Given this is a movie about gigantic beasts, and even to an extent feels this should have been a completely different movie altogether, because I don't think they utilized Godzilla properly either. This movie holistically feels like a Kong movie, and honestly the scenes with Kong without humans or Godzilla, where it's silent we just see Kong interacting with his environment, are the most entertaining trait of the film. This is what I wish the movie would have been, almost a standalone Kong film where we explore this world and how Kong interacts with it. But unfortunately, this is something I feel would have scared studios to have a Kong standalone movie with no humans and no spoken words. But this movie and the scenes that we got proved this could have worked. But I could see the similarity to the style and story we're getting from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes coming up this year. And two monkey movies in the same year, that would just be bananas from studios. When it comes to Kong, with every Kong move, I can see personality put into our Kong character. And the studio that brought it was Wet FX, which does a fantastic job here in creating a subtle personality, but also with the gigantic monsters that surround Kong. But open and honest, I'm probably going to get flack for this, but I did have a problem with our baby Kong, who seemed a little too cartoonish compared to the rest. And maybe this was on purpose to kind of give a subtle nod to Kong movies of the past, but I wasn't bought into this character design. There is definitely a different feel to some of our characters here, especially with our Godzilla, who seems since the last time we saw him has been in training to run a marathon. We see this massive beast sprint from one side of a city to another, arms swinging and all. He is athletic in this movie. I can tell that director Adam Wingard saw a weak script and really wanted to aim for an over-the-top spectacle that borders cartoon but never quite goes over the mark. Well, with the exception when we see Baby Kong, who is over-the-top cartoonish that our special effects character design tried way too hard to make him overly cute, to the point he's just artificial compared to the rest of the CGI characters. Godzilla Kong, the new empire, has its moments of awe, but then we get a pesky script involved that's so generically written it comes across as a school's talent show host that we want off stage so we can see some real talent. This is where the movie should have taken a chance and just focused on our monsters. These gigantic CGI characters don't need human involvement to be entertaining, especially when it's so obviously forced here by the human characters. There is no question to me that this movie will entertain. It's a complete fireworks show of visual spectacles with nothing nothing else of substance to really offer. It's a Godzilla and Kong pay-per-view fight that audiences will pay to watch, but when it comes to the main event, it's a lot of build-up with no real satisfaction of a climax, with the exception of the mere sight of our two monsters fighting and our special effects artists placing cool things underneath our monsters to fall on, like buildings, monuments, pyramids. The only thing that was missing for our monsters to fall on to be destroyed was Sydney Sweeney's career after her last two movie picks. Stay tuned for the review of her latest movie that's coming up next. After our two big monsters fighting and cleverly selected buildings being selected to be destroyed, the only thing you are left with is paying $15 for a ticket for a ride that feels like 3 minutes. But for the mere shut-off-your-brain entertainment value of it, it did what it sought out to do. It was entertaining for what it was. So for that, I'm giving Godzilla Kong: The New Empire 2.5 stars. Cecilia, played by Sydney Sweeney, is a woman of devoted faith who is warmly welcomed to the picture-perfect Italian countryside, where she's offered a new role at a convent. But it becomes clear to Cecilia that her new home harbors dark and horrifying secrets in the new horror thriller Immaculate.
God saved me for a reason, but I'm still searching for what that reason is. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hello? I know God saved me for a reason, but I guess I'm still searching for what that reason is.
Too much blood of Christ. It's a miracle. You are with child.
Out of all the women in the world, why did he choose me? How can we trust what's inside you?
Suffering is love. Suffering, suffering, suffering is love.
You know, while walking out of Immaculate, I was thinking and kind of reminiscing that it's been almost 15 years since Sydney Sweeney made her first appearance on screen and started her career in an old friend of mine's film, Kevin Hamadati's Zombies of Mass Destruction, where she met her fate as a zombie being hit by a car. Since then, her career went on a path that we usually see: a lot of TV, some straight to streaming, some straight to video movies. Until just last year, we saw her in her breakout role, where she starred alongside Mr. Perma Grimace Face or Perma Sarcastic Face actor Glenn Powell in the surprisingly fun comedy Anyone But You. And just this year, she landed a Marvel role in Madam Web. And you know what? Pick any of Sydney Sweeney's long list of B movies, and that would have been a bigger accomplishment than that movie. But now we have her here playing as a nun in Immaculate. 2023-2024 looks to be Sydney Sweeney's year of appearing on the big screen. Now, even though she has filmed 6 films in the last 2 years, with only 3 hitting theaters, and I have to say that only one of those is one that I would recommend. And no, it's not Immaculate. The comedy Anyone But You really did help to get Sydney Sweeney's name out there. But again, with 2 flops following, this is the time to really be cautious of the role she picks. Now, before I become too harsh, Sydney Sweeney isn't a horrible actress. I actually love her on-screen presence. And it's not that Immaculate is a horrible movie, but it is a very, very bland one. While I was watching Immaculate, it was reminding me of snacking on dry, shredded wheat. But to its credit, it was the frosted kind, because it did have some flavor to it, but by the end of the movie, it was still like eating sand. Immaculate may not have a ton of original ideas here, but when it comes to the setting, the cinematography, and the potential mystery, all of these elements could have built upon its script. Our director, Michael Mohan, shows all of his cards before the hand is even over. His direction style in this is completely driving in the wrong lane when it comes to what the script is trying to portray. Even though writer Andrew Lopel's script isn't memorable per se, but I could tell what he was trying to do with it, which is build a setting and set of characters that set the scene on a mystery that gives hints and curiosity through words. But then we have a newer director, Michael Mohan, through his direction, give the finger to Lopel and say, nope, we're not doing that. Not today. Mohan is so focused on showing off his style versus substance that he eliminates any and all curiosity about this convent. Along with her biggest film to date is cinematographer Alicia Christian, who has worked with Mohan in numerous projects. The photography here is safe and it's wasted. I can always tell when a cinematographer and a director are in step and in unison because the scene should help the story and visual presence. And here, the two do go hand in hand, but the vision is so off the mark of what the screenplay hints at. The photography to this beautiful country hillside is wasted in a dark and gloomy environment. There is no contrast to the light and dark, and as we walk the courtyard and the halls of this environment, we automatically want to shout to Sydney Sweeney to run! They're doing something bad! They're gonna kill you! I found my eyes wandering the screen to look at this convent. There's a lot here to really be eye-catching, but our filmmakers are so set in creating a dark tone, the movie only knows how to execute one style and one style only: gloomy. It reminded me of movies of the 70s and 80s that attempted to make period pieces to demonstrate gloom and depression, but that's not what we get here necessarily. We are introduced to a new beginning, change, mild excitement of something new for Cecilia, and we just have gloom. There's nothing for our setting to really complement this character, to show hope or show what the character is feeling. If I was a character in this setting, I'd be on the first bus out of there. Mohan has an eye for what he is comfortable with and not translating the actual written dialogue on screen, which is a shame, because that could have turned this movie from a meh average one to meh, at least it's fun to look at kind of movie, an above average kind of movie. The screenplay by Lopel may be a straightforward mystery formula, thriller, horror film that doesn't really stand out, but with the right director, it could have amplified what this writer was trying to do. Now, when it comes to Sydney Sweeney, anyone but you really got my attention when it comes to her on-screen presence and some on-screen likability. Here, when it comes to Immaculate, her on-screen presence is still a forte, but it's because I'm looking for that likability. I'm looking for that on-screen presence. But when it comes to her portrayal of the character of Cecilia, I didn't really buy it. Sweeney shows a level of confidence here that demonstrates the polar opposite of what the words are saying on screen. It is a completely safe and, dare I say, delivered in an above-average safe B-movie performance. The delivery just doesn't match what we are hearing from the words. I could really see Sweeney's experience in working on a lot of straight-to-streaming horror movies, because as the movie goes on and there's a heightened sense of danger, there's a heightened sense of thrill as the music gets tenser, this is where we can see Sydney Sweeney in her comfort zone. Her performance, when there is actual danger and horror, her performance seems more relaxed, more confident in the material. And by the time we reach the last 20 minutes is where Sweeney is at her best. But sadly, this is where she has the least amount of dialogue, and it's about her presentation. The emotion she puts into the way she presents herself on screen is the emotion interpretation I wanted to see from her from the beginning. Happiness, curiosity, worry, speculation, concern. All of these emotions are missing in a believable way from the beginning from Sweeney's portrayal. And because of that, it just becomes a linear performance. Immaculate is a horror thriller that doesn't allow the viewer to have a sense of wonder or mystery. It is upfront and honest on ensuring that you are not surprised on what's coming, which ensures that we get a movie that is bland and drags on when we know exactly what's going to happen next. Our filmmakers must have been concerned about telling the truth and not holding back any secrets or tricking the viewer, since they shot this movie in a church. But instead, the filmmakers have sinned by making a lazy-ass movie. I'm giving Immaculate 2 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out Back to the Balcony, the link to that YouTube channel will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.